Jay Powell speaking to the Senate subcommittee saying, if you think inflation is going to be 5%, that's what it becomes. It's very driven by expectations. And consumer inflation expectations remain stubbornly high. I think Conference Board was up about 6% for 1 year ahead expectations recently. So consumers are still think inflation's coming, even though inflation's actually coming down. So there's a mismatch there. There's also the mismatch in terms of how people feel about their economic situation versus the reality, and that's to do with inflation as well. So I think that getting that last mile will be the toughest, and that maybe has an implication for where the market is in terms of pricing in cuts next year. So at the moment, the market's pricing in a lot of cuts next year, but maybe they're maybe being a little bit premature. So I don't know if you would agree with that.
I do agree with that. I think that the last mile is going to be tricky, if only because actually for quite some time to come, we will be volatile with inflation. So this is the thing I think is underappreciated. The shocks, and in fact we've had several: pandemic, war, inflation itself, political dislocations, all of those shocks. It's only actually been, it'll be 4 years next March since the pandemic. And that maybe feels a long time. It's not a long time in economic land. No. So I could see a scenario, let's roll forward even further than next year. Let's go to 2030, a decade on. We look back and say, we really jumped around a lot. Inflation went up to 10, down to 3, up to 6, down to 1. And on average, it was probably 3 to 4% rather than 1 to 2%. But what's very hard for a central bank is how do you look through that? You're supposed to set policy for the long term, which is why it's definitely the key to think is higher for longer. I mean, high for longer, whether or not they're going any higher or not.